Hello and welcome to the Great Huyte North, the show where we give you the iciest takes you can imagine from the frozen wasteland of the North. I'm your host Charles, and with me is neither pleasure nor pain. Say hello, NP.
Hello, hello.
So we're gonna start by introducing ourselves. Just give us a little bit of background here, and then we'll dive right into some topics. So I'll go first. My background into all this sphere of things, I guess you could say, these right-wing topics, right-wing ideas, was probably rooted in my upbringing. I started off with some very conservative parents. I wasn't even allowed to watch Pokemon growing up. It was too violent for my parents' taste, so they kept me pretty insulated from all that stuff. I stayed away from the addictions of a lot of these cartoon shows that got people hooked on dopamine rushes coming from your typical gaming with Pokemon and that whole deal. So I stayed away from that. And then I also had a father who was excellent at bringing up family history. I was very, very well informed on the lineage of my ancestors and when they came to Canada. So I am part French, part German, part Irish, and part Scottish. And so I'm aware of going back 400 years, 1604, French ancestors came over to Canada. 1720, Scottish ancestors came here. Late 1700s, Irish ancestors came here, and mid 1800s, 1850s, my German ancestors came here. So I was very well informed. So I had a very strong appreciation of my ancestors and the people I come from. So that was already rooted in my growth. And then, you go through the school system. You're given the whole deal, diversity and multiculturalism is the ideal in Canada, and you kind of follow those roots because that's just what the social programming leads you towards, and you become very accepting of all these very degenerate ideas. But it didn't really take hold because of my background, I think. And so when I came across the classic YouTube rabbit holes, the Sargon of Akkad, it was only so long before you end up pushing your way towards edgier content. You could say like white nationalist type stuff, and yeah, you work your way through the whole route. Saw some James Alsop, and then eventually you're watching Mark Collette debate a couple merchants, and then you're right on board. You're all the way there. So and it's just this never-ending desire for knowledge and knowing that what exactly is going on. That's always been my drive. So I credit a lot of that to my upbringing and to my strong appreciation for my ancestors and knowledge of sort of the folk history that my people come from. So that is how I got here, and I'll turn it over to NP. You give us your background story here.
All right. Well, it's funny. I actually kind of had a similar upbringing, I think. Maybe to a lesser extent, though. I also wasn't allowed to play video games too much, although I went to friends' houses and did it. And movies the same. It was monitored. And my dad did tell me quite a bit about my ancestors as well. However, probably not quite to that level of knowledge. But I'm half French. I'm quarter Icelandic and a quarter Scottish. French side's been here since, some of it more recently, but some of it since the 1600s. The Scottish Icelandic got here in I think the big immigration waves at the end of the 1800s. They all fought in the First World War. Quite a few injuries in there too. I also came to this sphere older than you. I think Jordan Peterson, I'm not ashamed to say, was one of the first ones to introduce me to some of the conservative concepts and stuff. I'd already liked Ayn Rand, I am embarrassed to say, when I was younger. I listened to the same. Oh, I'm getting feedback from you now. Okay. I also listened to Sargon and Gavin McInnes and all that garbage while I was learning. then I met Tyler Hamilton, and he kind of clued me into some of the more, the better possibilities, let's just say, the ones that we like now. We met at a PPC thing, actually, because after the Trump stuff, I got curious about that, and then I kind of hopped on the Canadian populism briefly, as unsatisfying as that was. And that's the long story short.
All right, good stuff. So yeah, I'm sure some of our backgrounds will come in and out of the discussion as we go through forward on our different episodes here. We'll jump into some of these topics though. So just yesterday here, this Saturday, the 29th, this Canadian trucker thing came up through Ottawa and came up really to all the Canadian cities. You know, it hit everywhere across the board for the most part too. Some great success, lots of big numbers. I mean, looking at the capital, they were estimating 20 to 30,000 people coming out to that. I know Edmonton had a couple thousand, Saskatoon had a couple thousand, Calgary had probably close to 10,000. So all across the board, it was successful in bringing people out. There was convoys, regardless of where you were at. So I guess what I wanted to talk about is sort of the reaction in the media to this, and some of the interpretations that came from this. Because obviously this is in response to COVID mandates, but I think that's not quite as interesting as how we are watching our government and our leaders react to it. So one of the talking points we see all the time from the media is that this is just a fringe minority of disgruntled people. Like, it's barely anyone involved in this, and then obviously those huge numbers, not quite the fringe minority that the media wants people to think. And then they start bringing in these narratives of these racist white nationalists running this Canadian trucker rally. Elements of white rage coming out. This hashtag Flu Truck Clan, just this goofy garbage, and it was completely astroturf. Like, these accounts that were posting this hashtag were blowing up with thousands of likes coming from like 67 follower accounts.
I was dunking on a few of them yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. It's just goofy, like, comes out of nowhere. But they need to frame any sort of resistance as this sort of racist and evil. Like it's this liberal regime that needs to have a boogeyman of racism there for it. So even though these truckers in general, they seem to be these libertarian types, and
I'd say populist.
There's a lot of Pajeets in the mix too. Even like you see that because that's a huge thing in Canada, where you have lots of these Indian truck drivers and running these companies. So it's really not this racial uprising that they want it to be, it seems.
Yeah, not at all. I'd say more populist than libertarian, but regardless, they are certainly not Nazis. No,
and I think Jagmeet Singh was bringing up the Muslim attack. This is 5 years from this mosque shooting, and then using that to hype up the regime propaganda on violence against minorities. Again, it's like 5 years since this happened, and then this needs to be another big deal event for them. And it's not quite a January 6th style event, I would say, but it seems like they would want it to be. They're just desperate for something to grab hold of, so they can maintain the narrative of this threat of racism always around the corner, even though it's so far from the truth.
Hey, Charles, do you think it was the Russians who started the whole thing?
Well, that seems to be again, they just really need some narrative going on, and there seems like CNN, or not CBC, they were claiming that this is potentially Russian actors, right?
Yeah, I'll play the clip.
Yeah, go for it.
I do ask that because, given Canada's support of Ukraine in this current crisis with Russia,
Wait,
I don't
sorry, are
know
you
if
playing
it's
the clip or is
far-fetched to
that?
ask, but there is concern that
Yeah,
Russian actors
you won't be
could
able to hear it.
be continuing to
Gotcha.
fuel things as this protest grows, but perhaps even instigating it from the outset.
Well, again, I'm going to defer to our partners in the public safety, the trained officials and experts in that area.
Sorry, I'm not very good at this program yet. Transition up. Okay. Back to you.
Okay, well, yeah, in that clip, it seems like they're pushing for this idea that again, it's like that Russian hacker narrative, and Russian interference in elections. Now it's Russians making Canadians push back, Canadian truckers push back against um, vaccine mandates, and they tie this into the whole Ukraine deal, and the Russians need to destabilize Canada so that they can have a better chance of invading Ukraine. Like how terrible is your propaganda that you're running with that narrative? It's just like what a bunch of goofy losers.
The funniest part is it's actually Ukrainians who destabilize Canada historically.
Well, yeah, we got this article on that particular topic on Immigration Watch. This guy Frank Hilliard. He talks about in this article how the Ukrainian community in Canada in the 1960s was kind of astroturf into pushing against biculturalism, the French English ethno nationalism of the earlier Canada, and Pierre Trudeau seemed to just jump right onto this narrative and use this to bring in Ukrainians as I guess a third column, a fourth column, whatever you want to call it, and to mess up this bicultural ethno nationalism that was present in Canada before this. And he makes the point that this was used to sell the idea of a multicultural Canada where anyone can fit into this mosaic, and it's all about just integrating these different cultures to fill the space on the mosaic. I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of that.
Yeah, well, yeah, Yuzik, I have some thoughts on. The guy was a Saskatchewan politician, and yeah, he didn't assimilate well, and he was bullied a little bit, probably by the French Saskatchewan people and the Anglos, and he was a school teacher, a music teacher, I think, and he ended up one time having the school burned down. There's a Stradivarius inside. So I don't know. I've always thought that was a very fitting metaphor for the kind of legacy the guy left, burning a beautiful, one-of-a-kind European instrument. I have nothing against Ukrainians as an ethnicity. I even welcome them to Canada, but I even support Ukrainian nationalism in the Ukraine. I just really don't like it being used as a wedge against us.
Yeah, I think that's all part of the issue there, and I mean, this whole context of bringing Ukrainians in as another piece in the multicultural mosaic, um, it was just used so maliciously, and I think they bring up how at least Frank brings up in this article how they brought in culture as this abstraction basically. So you had Ukrainian culture, but it was just food and music and dancing, and they didn't bring any of the rest of Ukraine to Canada. It's not like they actually were genuinely interested in preserving the culture of Ukrainians. It was just, here's food, here's dance, here's whatever. Now you have a Ukrainian community in Canada. This is another piece in your puzzle. But they did not have any of the government system. The Ukrainians, they didn't have the full the I guess, the miasma of Ukrainian identity integrated within. It was just pure abstraction. And that is the exact model used for all future immigrants since then. You bring these people in from whatever country they're a part of, and you tell us, okay, yeah, we just another beautiful piece in this, quilt of diversity. And all you do is you say, okay, well, it's just the culture abstracted out of the actual environment, the embodied nature of the way these people live their lives. And then you strip everything else away. Like, it's not like any Islamic community is coming here, anybody from the Middle East is coming here and sustaining their cultural traditions in the way that they're instantiated in their home countries. No, they're coming here and they have these sort of loose, floating notions of Middle Eastern culture, of Islam, and all of the religious and patriarchal values just get stripped away, because you're just really not allowed to be like that in a liberal democracy at all. And what good is that for these people? Well, like you see it. You see these obese Middle Eastern kids walking around. You see the daughters don't actually wear their head coverings most of the times, and some that do end up being secret sluts. And so it's just, all this is doing is bringing these people here, completely abstracting them out of their cultural environments while pretending that they are a part of their cultural system. And it's this completely false belief that you can just slam these people into this mosaic as pieces and maintain them as they were in their founding environments. So again, starting with Ukrainians and on from there, it's been the same process over and over again. And it's not good for anyone. And it just goes back to that conversion of people into these economic units that is used for continual justification of immigration. Don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I wholly agree. I don't often think of it from their perspective and them losing their culture. It's my foremost worry is us losing ours, but you're completely right. It really does nobody any good.
Yeah, and I mean, what we get to is in the Ukrainian thing, and really in any global conflicts now, is you get these ministers agitating for support of whatever country is in crisis. So right now it's Ukraine. So you have these people saying, we've got a strong Ukrainian community in Canada. Let's support Ukrainians against Russia. But it's like, we have Russians here too, though. Like we have both sides of this conflict in our country, and it's the same thing for any other third world country or any other conflict whatsoever. We have people from every country, like anyone is just in here now, and so they can just use this narrative to say we support X country because we have those people here, and we need to support whatever global liberal conquests need to be gone after through the regime. And so like it's fun. You get like Métis and Sikh ministers showing support for Ukrainian nationalism across the world when there's absolutely no relation there. And like, imagine being Métis and now you're being used by the liberal regime to agitate conflict across the world. Like, that's like the opposite of what you'd think these people would want. And yeah, now what a joke of a country.
I guarantee your average Métis. I guarantee your average Métis. You're gonna mute me there. I guarantee your average Métis does not give a shit about the Ukraine. It would just be a purely political thing, and that goes for most of them. But yeah, I would never ever support any war in Canada that didn't either add to our territory or defend our territory. Like, why? I probably wouldn't even support many of the ones that would add to our territory, but there's not even a chance I'd even look at it if not.
Yeah, and you can't even look at it in terms of adding or subtracting from your own power. Like, you're not even allowed to see yourself as a nation with interests other than economic interests. So the idea that, like, we have a unique people, we have a nation of collective interests, is just not relevant to the conversation. And you're not allowed to look at it in terms of what's protecting my people and what's attacking my people. It's what's protecting the economy and what's detracting from the economy. And it's like this article that I was looking at from BNN Bloomberg talking about how we need to get 100 million people in Canada by 2100. And so this Wiseman guy, this funny looking character here.
Wonder where he's from.
It's a mystery to us all. So now he's agitating that the only way Canada can get to the place it deserves to be in the world stage is by maxing on immigration. And this goes back to the only thing you can advocate for is economic values and materialistic values. It's not really benefiting the people of Canada and the nation of Canada, whatever that even is anymore. We don't really have a concept of that properly. It's just anyone's here. But it's fine to agitate for it because economic need, it can be justified. And what he says is that we have to have immigration because our birth rates are falling. So because the economy needs population growth, we have to use immigration. And because birth rates falling, well, immigration is the only answer to this. So he says, just bring more people. So you can't do anything about the birth rate, right? But the people already here, you have to bring more people. And he, laments depopulation. That's not good. You can't have any depopulation. It's back to this infinite growth mindset of capitalism. And all it is just quantifying people. Whatever fits the economy best is how this guy wants to frame it. He can only think about it in mercantile terms. You can only think about it as a merchant. There's no other values relevant in the equation here. It is it's a very disgusting way to look at the world.
I always think about it like, maybe if we need to bring people in to work at Tim Hortons, maybe we don't need one Tim Hortons per every 10 people in our country. I don't know. That's just one solution.
It's it doesn't really help anything because what are you building your economy off of? And more Tim Hortons. What does that benefit? We don't really need more of these random big corporate businesses to employ more, third worlders for some cheap labor. It's always the economic angle, and it's funny because this rapid growth, this 100 million in under 100 years, completely goes against the narrative that they push on the environment, right? You're going to grow the country like crazy, do all this infrastructure work, all the housing needs, all of the energy growth that you're going to need. All at the same time, the Canadian government pushes for, worry about the environment, worry about the environmental damage, but we also have to max out the amount of people coming from these third world places where they're really not, in most cases, they're not having that much of an environmental impact, but let's bring them here and jam up their environmental impact 10 times over with just millions of them. So there's always this contradiction. They can just play with whatever angle they want to play with to make the outcome work, as long as it, again, goes back to justifying the economy.
Right, because if they really wanted 100 million Canadians, they'd start promoting natalist policies, and in 20 years we could probably get there. My grandma had 16 kids.
Yeah, it's not that hard to make that work, because say my grandma had 10 kids, and they were doing it on one income, and not even a very well-paying income at that. So there's no reason you can't go back to that style of population growth and pronatalism. But instead, this guy mentions that he wants to fully deploy women into the workforce. So while the birth rate's declining, let's toss more women. Let's get every single woman into the workforce. Even these people that we bring in, even these immigrants from these cultures who don't have this approach to life where women are in the workforce. No, we want to bring them in, and we want to force the woman as well into the workforce. And again, you talk about wanting to deal with the declining birth rate while at the same time forcing women to the workforce, regardless of where these people are from. It is completely contradictory. But as long as it meets the demands of the liberal hegemony, it's justified in the lens of these people.
It's completely contradictory based on the reasons they're saying they're doing it. It makes perfect sense if they're trying to wipe us out.
Yeah, exactly. If you see it as a definitely replacement, and as well as just living in the mercantile age where you have reign of merchants and reign of quantity. The guy he basically describes people as these immigrants as a means for compound interest. So he doesn't really care how it comes about. He just wants more in no matter what. And
he definitely looks like a guy who cares about compound interest a lot. And yeah, Wiseman, I'm starting to put two and two together here.
Very much so. When you say these people are only interested in economic gains, they seem to all fit this bill, and I'm sure they are very interested in getting rid of the people that stand against that, and I think that's their main modus operandi. We'll go with that.
You got it. Well, I don't want to talk about this Grabler anymore. Let's move on to... Do you want to talk about Josh's article? I really liked it, so I kind of want to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into it. So I think what we'll try and do this on a regular basis on this show is, on top of some of these current events, we'll dive into some bigger brained idea stuff. There's lots of tools that very smart individuals in the sphere are giving us to use, and we want to. Number one, and we just find this interesting. Like, so a lot of stuff is very interesting, but it's useful. It's useful, but it can be pretty high fluent stuff. So we want to kind of bring this down to a level that people can digest and maybe integrate as tools to navigate the world. So we're going to start off. We're looking at something from Imperium Press's Firstness journal. I think it's edited by Joel Davis. And we're going to dive into this article from Josh Neal. And it's a very interesting article. It's called The Ethics and Trauma of Creation. And so he is getting into some concepts just where he compares and contrasts what he describes, where he takes from Husserl, this concept of the life world, against the hyperworld, kind of derived from Baudrillard and his notion of hyperreality. And this is essentially just the contrast between the real world, the living world, and the internet world. And so he goes into plenty of different concepts about what are the differences between these two, and kind of what problems are presented within each sphere, and what we can do about that. So, NP, I don't know if you want to start off with some of your notes here.
Sure. So I think the first thing to do is distinguish properly between hyperworld and lifeworld. You know what? You did a pretty good job, actually. It's basically the internet versus meat space. That's dumbing it down too much, maybe, but we'll go with it. What I find interesting is he doesn't reject hyperreality whole cloth. He views it as a magnifier of existent problems in the life world. Not as like it does originate new problems too, but instead of getting rid of the hyperworld, he wants an overman to bridge the gap between these two. And that would be like our revolutionary project of the age. I kind of gave a spoiler there. That's that's the end part. But as you're going through this, you should read it. I really liked it. You'll find him break down the problems in both the hyperworld and the life world, and he gets into some very interesting psychological concepts like parasociality and the virtuality concept, I think it is, fantasy with a PH. I'm not able to summarize this in my head quite. I can't talk about it quite as easily as I thought I could. I'm perhaps not very eloquent today, but I'll let you take a crack at it.
Yeah, sure thing. So I guess one of the first things as he works his way towards this solution that we want to strive towards and being able to navigate both worlds and bridge the gap. The real issue stems in the life world, like the real world, where the current life world doesn't really offer genuine interaction. It doesn't offer proper spaces for human development, especially masculine development. So he describes that the hyperworld, this online world, has become a site of refuge against the impossibility of life in the real. So we use like forums, comment sections, and social media as a way to simulate those things that we lack in the real world, in the life world, because the institutions that we run into today that sort of surround our development in the real world don't offer us anything of value, things that have traditionally been valuable to us. So we end up getting trapped in the hyperworld because of that. Right? The degeneration in the life world, all it does is serve to reinforce the security of the well-seated members of society. So whoever's already well established in the real world, in these institutions, they're just continually reified, and everyone else is sort of left floundering. And again, it leads them back to online, and it causes a loss of humanity, is what he describes. There's a loss of humanity in the average person in the world, because you either get to choose to try and climb your way up into these institutions and just sacrifice all of your values, because you can't have any real moral values. You've got to be some weird degenerate freak to make your way up through the institutions. And really the only way to have improved material social standing is to sacrifice your morals. You can't be a noble, virtuous man and secure your role in these structures. And I'm going to jump in and bring in some Thomas Carlyle, because I think that's relevant. He talks about heroes and hero worship. This is one series of lectures I'm reading. I thought this was relevant to what Josh is describing here, and it's a lack of heroic in the life world that leads men to go search for it online, because you really can't find it anywhere else. And Thomas Carlyle describes that men are not aroused to heroic action by ease. So what we see in these institutions, these degenerate institutions, is that we have nowhere to have a purpose, to have value as a hero. And you either get to choose to fade away to nothing, or to sell your soul to climb these social statuses, these status hierarchies. And what we need instead is this opportunity to become something nobler, as Carlyle describes. Like at least the poor soldier, the guy who's just hired to be shot, he has the honor of a soldier. And so the reality is we aren't here for sweet things. We're here to do noble and true things, to vindicate yourself under God. And the thing is the life world doesn't really give you that at all. So you have to go seek that somewhere else, and it seems to be the hyper reality that we go and dive into to seek the heroic, because we can't really find the difficulty and the abnegation, chance for martyrdom at all in the real world anymore.
Okay, this is a good place for me to ask you a question. Good place to ask.
Go for it.
Sorry, you got it. I had a question about this to you. I said I kept writing authenticity in my notes, and I noticed he uses it differently. You kind of explained to me that authenticity has a extremely specific meaning in Husserl and Heidegger, I think. What? So I think it's authenticity that people are weirdly and conversely seeking by going into this hyper reality, but it like destroys it in them. It destroys all. Can you explain to me what Husserl meant by authenticity, and probably Josh?
You know what? I can't do it justice, honestly. Like right off the bat out of my head. But the authenticity that you're describing, it's true. People are lacking that. I think that's what I'm kind of getting at here in this relation to the heroic. People don't have sincerity in their lives. They don't have the opportunity to be any of that. And again, the authenticity of Husserl or Heidegger is a different concept. It refers to very specific things. It's almost a logical concept. But yeah, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by messing up that description right now, and I don't have it in the back of my head. But the point is, people go looking for it online because I think as he describes later in the article, the opportunity of the hyperworld is going to find some of that knowledge, the knowledge of past virtues and past traditions that have been locked away, that you don't have access to through academic institutions, these liberal institutions that prevent you from understanding these concepts. You at least can go on the hyperworld now and discover any of this, and you have people describing these things, bringing forth these old concepts. And again, people like Imperium Press, they've been doing an excellent job of that. So that's what this is valued. But in searching for that sincerity and those time-honored traditions that have been lost, you have to be careful that you don't get wrapped up in these sort of hollow communities online that just sort of simulate the actualization of these values.
It's really easy to do. There's a lot of fun group chats out there that go nowhere and really do nothing.
Yeah, and I think that's what Josh kind of warns us against, is trying to we have to try and avoid, when searching for these lost knowledge and these virtues, we have to ensure that we find the value. And then I think he even says this on an interview where he describes this, is you kind of climb to the top of the ladder and then you kick the ladder down, right? You get out of there. You get what you need and you get out. Because again, once you uncover these sort of ancient truths and whatnot that some maybe aesthetic right-wing poster brings to your attention, the thing is not to just consume it as an aesthetic of pure consumption. The thing is to now deepen your understanding of it through your own work and manifest it in the life world, because that's the only way we get back to a life world that's worth living in, a life world that provides that noble and heroic capacity, is pulling out the value and then manifesting it in some way that reflects its true meaning. So I think that's kind of what he's pointing at with diving into the hyperworld for what it's worth, and then trying to bridge that gap and making it real on the life world.
I have another question for you. He says right off the bat that the liberal regime has essentially captured most of the hyperworld, and I think it's like a lot of their neuroses and psychopathies that affect it, and he's referring to censorship and stuff like this. Do you think liberalism is particularly well suited to capture something like the hyperworld? Does it have some innate qualities, or is it just a question of they're in power?
Well, it seems to need to do that. It seems to need to. Again, he actually describes. He describes that the hyperworld does have the capacity to transgress upon the borders of morally and creatively sclerotic liberal totalitarianism. And this is what he's describing in its value in resuscitating the older knowledge forms that we were talking about earlier. But I think that that same totalitarianism of the liberalism, where I mean, even in the topics that we addressed earlier, where they can just kind of reframe any event or narrative to fit what is suited for liberalism. It has that unique tendency to always be on to create a narrative of having the moral high ground. So in terms of the speech aspect, closing off these avenues to find some genuine knowledge, it's like, again, the hate speech stuff. Well, you can have free speech, but hate speech is a no-go. And so if you can constantly redefine the territory in the way that liberalism seems to do so well, I think it does have a strength for itself in kind of outlining the ways in which you can navigate the hyperworld. Although I think it has its limits as well, as things seem to continue. The technology and decentralization of that technology seems to progress.
Yeah, there's all kinds of good new possibilities emerging for avoiding this. Odyssey videos being on the blockchain, and there's this, I haven't checked into it, but the federated, what is it called? The Twitter thing that's federated is decentralized.
The Fediverse, I think.
Fediverse, yeah. That's a pretty ironic name.
Yes, certainly.
Another, I really like how he describes the feedback loop between the real world and the hyper world. The life world, it gets magnified into the hyper world, but then it actually comes back out, and the hyper world effects with its net new perverted, magnified, it's like concentrated orange juice of evil comes back into the real world. I hadn't heard it explained that way before. It sends a shiver down my spine thinking of the internet, this big uncontrollable thing leaking back out into our lives. And, well, you know what's on there. It can't possibly be good.
Yeah, no. I think back to that example of the teenage girls on TikTok developing these tics, and these like mental problems, just by being on TikTok, and then then it goes into the real world, and then that leaks into their social circles, and so they all seem to, again, is the intersubjectivity, the relation between these subjects, these different people in the real world, is now being infected through hyper reality, the hyper world. And then, again, they film their own lives, so whatever has leaked back in now gets filmed again and then sent back in to the hyper world. And it's crazy how that operates. It's one of these things where the way in which technology opens things up for us also provides this horizon. I think he describes it this way, of the complete unknown. And this is one of those things where you just never could have imagined happening on this scale, this way that it leaks into the real world and then starts that feedback. And I think it's necessary, these technological progress is just going to keep happening. But how do you react after the fact, and what do you do to mitigate these effects? And again, when we talk about bridging this gap between the hyper world and the life world in a healthy way, I mean, you need someone truly great to make that happen. You need someone who actually cares about the people and the effects. But we just don't really have that in any of the institutions at the moment. So, it's tough to deal with this technological process and the horrors that come with this, when we don't have anyone willing to step up and confront it with the power of the overman, I guess you could say.
I think we can take his overman thing slightly metaphorically. I think it might not be one guy or even one set of particularly great guys, but it could be a somewhat of a group project. If we all endeavor to do a little piece of this, it would be a massive improvement. It would gradually create a culture capable of I don't know, integrating the hyperworld healthily. I know that like some of the TRS guys like Marty and stuff would probably just, I don't know if they despise this idea of embracing the hyperworld. They have a serious contempt for it, but in a way, a guy like, say, Dogbot, who takes a concept like where every Hollywood girl is actually a guy, and it's exaggerated, and I wonder if this sort of, I don't know if he's being artful in that or like satirical or how much he genuinely believes it. Either way, it's sort of, with all due respect, I like the guy a lot, sort of schizo reimagining of our world. I wonder if that's not one way to, I don't know, would that be like is that making it worse, or is that maybe somehow starting to accomplish this goal?
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because, from my estimation, I would say, yeah, it's making it worse because it's disconnecting things more from reality, and you don't really, you can go so far in that schizoid tendency, just because you can simply do, like, the hyperworld just presents you with those opportunities to make the world that you want to make, and that's at least in the way that I've seen it described by someone like Merleau-Ponty. The schizo world is sort of this world that just ends up being the world that you create for yourself, and it doesn't have any base in reality, in true perception. And so the hyper world is this field where you don't have a base of true perception necessarily, because you can create these these theories can just spin out of control. Or you even see on Twitter some of these schizo posters, for example. They're funny. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about here. These just, like, you can just have these insane conversations where you talk about I don't know. I can't really think of
Tartaria?
Yeah, exactly. You can just go into I met this girl, and I gave her a shoe and then ran off, and just some weird random thing you just make up, and you don't have any grounding. I think that's almost the opposite of what you would want to do. You, like, diving into just greater and greater schizo territory. It's funny, but again, you see it taken into a realistic, unironic approach, and I think that just severs you more from the life world. So I think you embrace the hyper world in the way that, again, and I agree with you, it's not just one person. It would have to be an institutional, a systemic approach. You'd actually have to have, I think, an institution made up of these conscious individuals, as he describes, people that have abundance of moral gifts. That's what Josh describes. You need institutions of these people to make that happen, to bridge that gap between the life world and the hyper world in a way that isn't this sort of schizo disconnect from the life world.
That said, it will probably be a singular guy who will first strike upon the ethos that everyone else can kind of imitate. But tough to say. And he gives us a bit of a map, but it's just that. It's like he's got like a slight outline of a coast and a here be dragons kind of thing. We know there's maybe a continent out there, but no one's yet reached it. So it'll be interesting to see if we can manage it in this lifetime even. It does seem radically important.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the biggest takeaways you can get from this article is that you really can't get the true sense of community, of the traditions that you want to be establishing in the real world in the hyper world. you can only get so much from it. But I think so much of our spheres do get caught up in that because, again, there's seems to be consequences. People are scared of feds or whatever, and manifesting out of nowhere in the real world. It's a little bit, again, it's this paranoid, schizoid approach where someone's coming after you, hiding under every rock. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be careful. It doesn't mean you shouldn't take your security into account. But it is to say that if you aren't starting to bridge the world for yourself, then you're just going to be locked into the hyperworld, and until that this overman type or this overman institution does all the work for you. And I don't think you're really giving yourself the right opportunity to succeed if you just hide in the life world as a refuge, or sorry, hide in the hyperworld as a refuge against the degenerate life world that we have right now. I mean, the only way is like true formal mentorship, like getting that in the real world, getting real education and training. And this is stuff that Josh describes that you need to get, building real hierarchies, making that happen in the real world. Not just, again, you see these kind of simulated in the hyper world, but you need to do that for yourself in the real world. And if you can't make that happen, you need to find people around you that can help you make that happen. And I think that's probably the main takeaway. The first step is just being able to do that, just having a group, having a community where you can start to take those steps, because you can't just wait around for some other overman, some other conscious individual type to build his institution so that you come out of the hyperworld with the help of them. I think is everybody's responsibility to figure that out for themselves.
Yes, in 2022, I don't know if we've been making a lot of new people in our sphere. If anyone's out there who's not actively connected, working out, hiking, whatever the thing, with putting up stickers, whatever the thing, with their local group, it's as easy as going, yeah, there's ways to do it, and you know how to do it, and it's time to do it. You can't just sit frying your brain in hyper reality. It's depressing, frankly.
Yeah, no, it's there's no good that's going to come of that at this point. It goes back to what Josh has stated is, at some point you just kick down the ladder and you take the next step into the next horizon. And again, it's a horizon to explore, and you have the chance to take on this heroic venture and explore this new horizon. And it's not easy. This is a complicated new paradigm. It's not just like mapping out a land as you cross this vast new continent before you. It's a weird combination of virtual and social statuses and structures. So yeah, it's not easy, but if you want to have some meaningful heroic venture, this is where you take that step. So yeah, time to take it, because there's nothing really left for you in the hyperworld if you're already here.
So what qualities do you think the overman would have? What are these virtues that he'll need to have? Can you take a stab at it?
Well, in my estimation, you're going to need to have real morals. Like, you're going to have a actual faith in something higher than yourself, first and foremost. If you don't have a faith, if you don't have a belief in something that's greater than you, then you can't be that kind of man, that vital man that we need. You have to have that desire to just give yourself to something greater than you can amount to as an individual. I think that is the sort of the epitome of what you want to see in that type of overman or virtuous man. And you have to be willing to embrace difficulty. You have to be willing to embrace struggle, and I think most of us are, but it does take some courage to do that. So someone who has courage and someone who has a strong faith in something beyond themselves can take that first step.
Some real ride the tiger vibes.
Yeah, you could say that. And then again, I think this is a Zizek quote, but like it's something like what do you say? Something about monogamy being the rebellious act, being the revolutionary act in the modern age. So it's I think it's taking on some of these traditional values, bringing them into the real world, and actually taking them up, bringing them forth, not just talking about them online, but living them. And if you're willing to do that with a faith in something beyond yourself, then you are starting to become that type of man that is necessary to carry this, to bridge these worlds and bring forth the kind of change that we want to see.
You know, that's interesting. If monogamy is sort of an enforced social condition that we use to ride out other troubles, grow our civilizations. I think it's like an agrarian solution, kind of. But what if part of the solution then is just to like have a self-enforced code of conduct online, like chivalry, like maybe that's a necessary step. Maybe there's a way that our group will start acting online by our own volition, and in like a new way. It'll have to be the internet's brand new. The hyperworld isn't brand new, but this new form of it is, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it'll become very bad manners to call someone a fed without great evidence or something like this. These sort of little mores that, I don't know. That was just a thought.
That's actually an interesting thought, though. Having a code of conduct. I mean, the issue, and I think Josh touches on this in his article, is that there's really no physical consequence, and that's one of the big drivers in maintaining social order in the life world, is having those physical consequences. You can just say whatever you want, and then there's no one there to really enforce the norms. But if there was a way to enforce those norms, and I mean, this is where it gets kind of tricky, because how do you enforce the norms on an anonymous poster? Like, what, make everyone not anonymous? Well, I don't think that's a good solution.
It would have to be self-enforced. It would have to be an honor code kind of thing.
And then I think that would be interesting if that could manifest, where you're bad jacketing some group, you're calling them feds because of there's no one's overweight in your group and they're too well managed, some stupid bullshit like that. Suddenly you are completely outcast from any conversation on these topics because you are just too much of a shitbag for anyone to listen to you. Now, how does that actually manifest? How does that actually work out where that person can't gain any traction in the hyperworld? I'm not sure, but it is an interesting thought to entertain.
This kind of happened before. Do you remember do you know that spider meme where it's like "shut up, brand" or whatever?
Oh, yes,
silence brand.
Yeah.
That managed to do a lot of damage to the corporate shilling. It's a soft enforcement, but it is probably driving her along the right track.
Yeah, I think some of those things do work out decently. You can't get people to delete their posts by ratioing them and overcoming it. But again, it's not 100% proven strategy, and it does cause some of the annoying little backbiting and just the nature of the internet. Like, some of these internet fights are just not worth it. But again, in that particular way, where you just have this meme that succumbs the conversation that for example those brands are trying to bring out, or I don't know if you remember the GIF of the boombox being thrown in the guy's face with "shut the fuck up" on it.
That was great. I'm also a fan of shutting down people with piggy poop balls.
Yeah. So some of these things are kind of, I guess you could call them prototypes or potential uh, potential baselines, these sort of primal versions of an honor code. But again, it just seems very difficult to enforce that honor in a mass way. But maybe we will see something like that manifest. But I think again, you have to reestablish the life world and have those codes in the life world for those people to bring them forth into the hyper world. So that might also just be one aspect of that growth process.
Maybe we can also harness this magnifying feedback loop to our own ends. Maybe it wouldn't. Could the hyperworld possibly manifest good? Is that even a possibility?
That's also interesting. Seeing how you can bring that sort of that drip feed that was once poisonous and turn that into something that manifests instead of these like weird behavioral tics. You manifest, I don't know, healthy fitness behaviors, or you manifest better manners, or chivalrous behavior, or I'm not sure. There's probably some way to make that happen, though, to reverse engineer that process and bring some good into the world. That it's something to consider. And I think, I guess listeners probably should see how that works, because I can imagine you go on TikTok and you might, who knows, there's a way to like I said, reverse engineer it to make something good happen.
Maybe the answer was memes all along. I don't know. I feel like Josh would tell us, no, you can't, because the nature of the hyperworld magnifies the evil parts. It doesn't magnify the good by its nature. I'd like to talk to him about that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to ponder, but I mean, it might even be as simple as real world actions getting promoted through the hyperworld. I mean, we see these activists. I guess you could look at Patriot Front, for example, and the aesthetics that they push in the life world get packaged in a very clean and aesthetic videos, that kind of thing. And then it sort of, that might inspire that positive feedback loop where now, well, this is something that we can do, or this is something that I'm missing. Where can I get this? Where can I get this brotherhood? And where can I get this sort of martial aspect that has been completely cut off from me, from these institutions? And suddenly that's manifesting through the imagery that is distilled through the hyperworld. It brings that feedback loop where we see a replication. So maybe that is one example where we see that work. I'm not sure.
I'm certainly a fan of their work. I couldn't say if I have to agree. I don't know if it's what's causing what. I don't know if Patriot Front is a manifestation of the life world encroaching on the hyper world, or vice versa, or both. You might be onto something there.
Yeah. Either way, I think watching the way these things play out and just having the awareness of that feedback loop, whether for the good or the bad, is a good tool to have in your toolbox. And I think being able to distinguish between what is possible in the life world and what is possible in the hyper world is important, so that you don't get caught into the trap posed to you by the hyper world, and to realize that the life world, while it may not be what we need it to be for us at the moment, we have to take it on, and again draw whatever we can from the hyperworld to make the life world valuable to us. But I don't really have anything else on this article other than, just go out and manifest something good in your community. How about you?
No. I'm too much of a grug to be able to talk about this too long without my brain hurting, but I think we made a good dent in her. We had a couple thoughts in there. It'll do. We'll maybe get smarter as we go. Who knows?
That's right. Always getting a little smarter. I don't know. Do you have any other topics you wanted to touch on, or should we wrap it up here?
I'll apologize for all the I'll apologize for all the technical issues. We're going to be cleaning those up in future episodes, and we have like new intro coming eventually. Stuff like this. Stay tuned to this. It'll be getting better and better. This is our first crack at it. I have high hopes for it.
And just some growing pains, getting the rust out of the works here. We'll figure this all out. So no big deal. I think I had fun. I enjoyed the discussion. I think we got a lot more out of that Josh Neal article than I expected, and so I'm happy with that. And is there anywhere, I don't really have anywhere they can find me, but how about you?
You can find me on Twitter at neither P nor P, or on Telegram at neither pleasure nor pain.
All right. Well, that's all we got for you today. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you boys around. Have a good night.
Good night. Take care.